like the art approach to media literacy because sometimes it's too hard when the communication approach.
Yeah.
And art is something more fluid that touches everything. It's just a comment.
Yeah. I did see. And
So,
also,
so Professor, no problem. How do you connect pop culture, popular culture, to disinformation? I mean, the pop culture, the comics, the novels, the internet, they have a narrative, a storytelling. How can you connect this to the atmosphere, the environment of disinformation that we are living nowadays?
It's actually very tricky because I think we all love pop culture, right? We all love books and we all love music and perhaps also games. And the interesting point is when you read a novel and the set Franz goes over the street, then it's actually a lie, right? It's a lie, but it's a beautiful lie because you learn something out of this in this book, right? So this is positive. And now what we see in the last years is that exactly these positive strategies of the arts are taken by the populists. About people who are just starting to use music, songs, which are very emotional, but then there is a hidden line, going against foreigners or saying something, you are not well treated by your government. And immediately there's this connection between these positive feelings we have about art and about seeing these stories and this hate or this kind of disinformation. So, and that's therefore I see and I observe that pop culture is used in the last years to really find a way to the hearts of the people. Because then the barrier falls of your mind, rationality is falling down. And this is so interesting that we still believe that with our rational solutions, we can fight against fake news and disinformation. It doesn't work. So, and therefore, I think we see really the strategies, or we can observe the strategies by these fake news spreaders and developers. That they very often find stories which are touching also our fears. If you think about the bedbug story, now shortly before the Olympic Games in France, all the German newspapers reported this. There are bedbugs, these little, animals which scares people. And then they found out that this was coming from Russia. It's a pure disinformation, And in the second wave, the Russian propaganda sent a new information and said, we have a lot of bedbugs in the French hotels. And surprisingly, this was coming when the Ukrainian refugees arrived in France. So there was this connection between this fear, all these weird animals, and the refugees. And this is this emotional connect that they do.
It's really connected to the same emotion that connects us to propaganda in war, for example. Fear, loneliness, scaring things about job, work, and that kind of thing. And but do you think in pop culture, is it a subtle thing? You need to be prepared, literate, to understand that between the lines of fiction may have disinformation too. Is it subtle or something explicit according to your research?
I would say, first of all, we should look back a bit in history where pop culture was created. It was in the 19th century in the UK the first time this term came up. And there was these cheap, stories which cost 1 penny.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was for
like
the
Pulp Fiction.
like the Pulp Fiction for the uneducated people. So, and they had this penny, and there were weird stories about crime and sex and all these things. And on the other hand, there was, of course, a kind of a resistance in it because there was this official British culture, for the educated people, and then there was the culture for the people. And of course, they had been more, and so it had an effect on the big culture. And this is the same what we see right now, that when we speak about disinformation and fake news, mostly on conferences, and so we speak between academics. These are people who went to a university, who pay a lot of money for meals and restaurants and so on, and the uneducated, they sit sometimes in front of the internet and they think, okay, but I have also power because these guys who are sending me these films and movies, they know me, and I think they are not so uneducated. Doesn't mean they're stupid, right? They are very smart, and I think that a lot of these people who are spreading the fake news or consuming them know that this is a lie, but on the same moment they understand, that gives me power, because the educated people fear this kind of culture,
Yeah,
it gives you power.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
therefore I think sometimes it's just a provocation, that they
Exactly.
say, you tell me something about fact checking, you say me this is not true, but I believe it.
But I believe it,
Who's stronger in that moment?
So the feeling is there.
Yeah, that's about
More than rational.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
more than
Yeah,
rational.
yeah.
And do you think pop culture is itself a solution to tackle disinformation, or we need to be educated somewhere else to tackle, to face it?
I mean, it's also the interesting question about solutions. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think there are solutions,
Yeah.
because that then would work quickly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think we should remember what is our heritage. Yeah, also in Brazil or in Europe, we have a rich tradition in literature, great stories. Yeah, invented stories, fiction. So fiction means lies.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah, yeah.
but these are the good lies. So we see something which is subtle, which remembers us why we are human beings. Yeah. So, and I think we should fight back by having the better stories. Yeah. So we should, and I'm not speaking about music, which is addressing now, the moralistic area.
Area,
I
yeah.
speak really about strong stories where people feel that there's more to love as to hate. So
Yeah, yeah.
where they feel inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting for somebody here in Europe. If you go to Finland, for example, yeah, and you look on the last elections, they didn't vote for the right wing
Yes,
parties, because they have very positive narratives in their country. The way how they speak about their culture, the way how they speak about their state. It doesn't mean is a utopia, or they also have a lot of problems. But this, I would say, there's a huge set of stories which are positive and inspiring.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the meanwhile, also in Germany, where I come from, yeah, if you read the newspapers, if you see the public debates, it's mostly very negative. Yeah, so everyone speaks about crisis, yeah, and not about opportunities.
Exactly.
So, and therefore, I would say a good story, for example, if you read a good book, yeah, or you listen to a good piece of music, yeah, then you have this feeling of openness. There's something possible for me and in the future.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So you need to be emotional literate as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have some personal story or professional story in your life or career that you want to share that touched this issue in a very symbolic way? I mean, it can symbolize what the power of pop culture and disinformation and populism and all the things that we are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, when you say, perhaps it's, I'll tell you two stories. Yeah, the one is an interesting one about Rod Stewart. This
Yeah, yeah.
famous singer. Yeah, and he made a tour right now. Yeah, through Germany. I couldn't join the concerts, but I've seen the reviews
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
concert. Then he was in Munich, and everyone was clapping and applauding. Yeah, and then he had a song where you could see Zelensky in the background, and he had a Ukrainian flag, and he just said, "That's not okay that they do this war over there." And everyone was applauding. Pop
Yeah, yeah.
culture, emotional, was not very political,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was a statement. He
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to say
Yeah, yeah.
against it. So, and
A
then
kind
he,
of engagement.
a kind of
Yeah,
engagement.
exactly.
And then he went to Leipzig. Yeah, this is just 400 kilometers far away from Munich, in the former eastern part of Germany. He gave the same concert, yeah, and at this point of the concert where he started to wear the flag and show the picture of Zelensky, they started to scream against him. Their own fans, yeah, and here you could see how strongly, even within the pop culture, yeah, the fights
Exists.
exist, yeah. But if you ask me for myself, a positive experience I make regularly is when I work in schools, for example, yeah, and we work with music, or there is a story people find interesting. There's always a third topic, yeah, where you can bring people from different sides and opinions together. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing about art. Good art is not about giving statements. Yeah,
It's not about moral.
it's not about moral, yeah, but it is about telling a story where everyone can find something about the own abyss, the own hopes, yeah. And I would like to bring this back to the debate, yeah, because this is too technically what we are doing. Yeah, we're speaking about data analysis. It's important. Don't get me wrong here. Yeah, it's data analysis. It's pre-bunking, debunking. It's fact checking. Yeah, and perhaps the last aspect, which I find very interesting, I mean, when I was a student, and I loved to do that, we read these books about Foucault, Deleuze, Derrida. Yeah. So, and what I learned and heard from my professors was the whole word is a construction. Yeah. Everything is formed through language and discourses and so on. And it was interesting. So, and now we see that immediately, or we see when the right wing guys started to take exactly these discourses, and they said, okay, going against Jews, going against foreigners. One can see it like this, or this is a good or bad. I don't know. It's just it's a bit it's floating. Yeah. So they are just using this vocabulary from the old progressive left wing thinkers, right? So, and we react by saying, no, no, we have to tell the truth. We have to give the facts. So immediately we're jumping on a side which has nothing to do with Foucault and Deleuze. And then this is a bit, not very convincing. Yeah, that we are immediately start talking now about and the truth. There's one truth. There are the facts. Yeah, I believe in facts. Don't get me wrong here. Yeah,
No, I understand.
but I also think that these scholars
They go beyond.
Yeah, may go beyond, and they did a good job by saying, actually, yeah, it's not that easy. Yeah, it's not that easy, and perhaps we should find more complex answers to fight against disinformation. Right. So,
And art's complex enough for that.
art is complex enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Professor. Thank you.